We're going to talk about that dream of revenue and growth today, as we often do.
That old chestnut.
I have to say, the first couple of years, we didn't do that. I mean, we were afraid to cut our market in half.
Go to market and revenue doesn't stop at acquisition.
And when you're on so many different systems, you have no real operational playbook. A lot of these groups don't actually recognize that they're lacking in the operational playbook department until they're forced to come to grips with the fact that now we're going to need to be doing the same thing the same way in all of our offices. And we've never designed SOPs and playbooks that allow us to operate in that way.
Welcome back to the Cheat Code and Friends podcast. I am Josh Wagner, joined by Justin Gray and Sean Kester. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are we today?
Living large.
Keeping the dream alive, man.
That's right.
Keeping the dream alive. Well, we're going to talk about that dream of revenue and growth today, as we often do.
That old chestnut.
That old chestnut on the Cheat Code podcast. So we're joined by a gentleman who I've got to know over the past year through partnership in one of our portfolio companies. He's done a tremendous job leading growth for Planet DDS, one of the darlings in the dental space. He is Mike Huffaker, the Chief Revenue Officer with Planet DDS. Mike, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and I can say I've learned a ton from Mike over the past year working within Pure Logic in our portfolio. And he's been a good partner, a good sounding board. You know, you come into these things where you don't know the space, right? You're not a native, and I know you weren't a native either, but you spent, a couple of years learning it and getting into it and integrated into it. And that was something I needed, just someone who I could talk to and learn the space, learn the nuance, learn those things. So I do thank you and appreciate you for that and that time. If nothing else, the partnership's been great on that front.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely dental's a unique space. So there's a lot of intricacies to it and some nuance as well.
Yeah, as is many vertical companies, which is one of the reasons we like vertical SaaS so much. But I want to kick off. Something you said to me last time we met was really resonated, and it's a hard one for early stage founders, especially to wrap their head around. And that's the concept of shrinking your market down into an ideal customer profile, we can call it, but to grow fast now. They always seem to think, hey, we can't shrink our TAM. We've got to go after everybody, be all things to all people, even if you're in a niche vertical like dental, right? I mean, You're already taking not a huge TAM and shrinking it down to something else, but you found success in that. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it can be scary for sure, especially as you mentioned in a vertical like dental, where you've got roughly 150,000 plus dental practices across the country, where the majority of them are still independent solo practices. And our ideal customer profile, and really the folks that see a lot of value in what our offering is, are multi-location groups that are intent on growing, as well as larger DSOs. Now, we had a benefit of being an enterprise-ready platform. So we were already up market. I think it's much harder for a lot of folks to start down market and then make that transition to enterprise. But by honing in on really focusing on that segment of the market, we were really able to dial in our sales process, increase our win rates, increase our ASPs, and it ended up being a huge boon for us. Though I have to say, the first couple of years, we didn't do that. I mean, we were afraid to cut our market in half, and we sat there and we looked and we tried to be all things for all people. But the benefit has been for us is, win rates have skyrocketed. Our marketing organization is able to focus on very specific messaging that resonates with that audience without having to try to have multiple messages out there in the marketplace as to who you are and what you do. And it's also the segment of the market that has less competition. There's not as many enterprise-ready solutions in the marketplace. When we're playing in the down market space, everybody thinks they're a solution for those prospects. When we get into the 20, 30, 40, 50 locations, all of a sudden it becomes us and a couple others versus us and 10 or 12 others. So lots of benefits to it. The ability to focus, to really just get great at doing one thing without having to spread your kind of focus all over the place has been a huge benefit to us.
Incredible. Yeah. What was the first thing that comes to mind is the sell job you had to do internally, right? Like that
Yeah.
internal up and down, right? The whole organization. So
Sure.
what did that look like?
Our CEO was really on board with this premise. Like he's always viewed us as an enterprise solutions company, really wanted us to get to the point where we were focusing on that ICP, even though it was scary to say, like, let's just cut out, half of the market and not even worry about that. And maybe even greater than half the market, to be
I think so.
honest. It's probably 60 to 70% of the market that we removed as a target. And so the selling of that happened more with the team themselves, because we were at that point generating demand for independent solo practices. You look at your new business acquisition, nobody really prospects all that well in SaaS sales as SaaS sales closers. They expect to have their bucket filled. And when you say, all right, we're going to cut out 40% of the opportunities that we were putting in your pipeline, because we're no longer going to go after that, but you're going to close more of the ones that you do get because they're more qualified and they'll be at a higher amount, is still a tough sell, because all they're looking at is, well, I was getting 5 or 10 leads a week and now it's 2 or 3. And it also increases the pressure. You can't screw those leads up. Like, they have to be handled properly or you get yourself in trouble. So it did take quite a bit of articulating what the model would look like, how we could still get to where we wanted to be. We did a lot of modeling on what we were generating from an MQL perspective, what we expected we could do from an outbound motion as well. And we got everyone pretty comfortable with it. And it has ended up being something where there's a lot of appreciation on the team now for not having to work through, I guess, for lack of a better term, things that just keep you busy that don't really drive results.
So, Mike, I'm curious, how has that team changed? And like, as you look back since the movement, I think it's interesting because so many startups just kind of, number one, view a TAM as an ICP and don't really understand the nuance that exists within verticals. But, because they're younger organizations, they're kind of doing the same thing on the talent side. They're, taking in whoever they think that they can, get to fulfill a role. And then when they find that there are these nuances and start going after, larger mid-market and enterprise deals, it changes the way that organization really needs to function, to your point earlier. And they need a different talent set. Have you guys seen those similar types of shifts in going after larger DSOs?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we initially had just one person on our DSO sales team. Now there's 5. And so we've invested in additional individuals. When we brought new talent on, we really had a focus on people that knew how to manage those relationships, multi-thread with a number of stakeholders, had already been in positions where they ran more sophisticated sales processes. With our existing team that we had on what we call the commercial side, which is up to 19 practices, there was a huge amount of up-leveling and retraining that we needed to do. We not only determined that we were no longer going to pursue independent practices, but we also have 3 products that we sell. So we have an imaging platform. We have 2 practice management solutions. One is for orthodontics. One is for general GP. And we had previously 3 separate teams for those 3 different products. What we decided to do was train the team on all products, streamline the team, and actually have everyone equipped and trained to sell each. And so that was actually a rough transition for us. We had a lot of people selling a relatively uncomplicated product in imaging that now had to sell a very, very complex, detailed solution for practice management. That probably took us longer than we expected to get them up to speed and effective at doing that. And in addition to that, they were predominantly selling 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 locations. And even the move to allowing them to sell up to 19 locations, it became a different conversation. You started to have a more sophisticated buyer, and oftentimes that's where they started to bring in an executive team. And so it really required retooling the entire team. Some folks were able to rise up to that and level up and do really, really well. And some folks self-selected out when they saw that that wasn't going to be an opportunity for them.
Yeah.
When you made this decision, I'm assume that you already had plenty of customers that were not in this new ICP or the new focus. Did you have to sunset some of those customers? You have to fire them? Like, what did that look like from a post-sale perspective? Because, that's an aggressive move if you decide you want to get rid of, some of your existing revenue.
Yeah, no, we definitely did not do that. And we still service and support the ones that we had. So they are still part of our portfolio of clients. And in this industry, it would be virtually impossible for us to just part ways entirely, because what also happens is there's folks that are a part of a larger group that decide to repurchase their practice and go out on their own. They don't want to use a different system when they do that. They're comfortable with what already exists. And that happens a lot in the DSO space. And so every year we probably gain 50 to 85 new independent practices that have just split off from DSOs that they were formerly a part of. Right. But where the real benefit is on the ongoing basis, the independent solo practices aren't typically as equipped from a resource perspective to effectively implement the software. You have the dentist who owns the business, who's seeing patients all day long, with an office manager who doesn't want to change anything. And so they sit there and have real big challenges in implementing and getting the change management done, doing the conversions and going through the trainings. And so kind of a relief of burden on us by not focusing on the solo side was that when you're selling to multi-location groups, they actually have internal resources to help manage that entire process. So even though it didn't really affect our current client base, to your point, your question, Sean, it's on the implementation on the go forward side, it is a lessening of our obligations on support and a lessening of obligations on implementation and training.
Yep. Makes total sense.
Yeah, you brought up something earlier that I think we should touch on, because I think the four of us here understand that go-to-market and revenue doesn't stop at acquisition.
Yep.
There's this whole implementation, customer success, post-sale process that happens. And it sounds like the product was enterprise ready, which is not an easy thing for most organizations to say. But talk about the uplift on the implementation cycles and the post-sale process that you had to think through.
Yeah, so post-sale is one of the more challenging things that we do. In this space, there's a data conversion. You bring over all the patient database and demographics and treatment plans and all their medical history. There's just a huge amount of information that needs to be taken from the old system and put in the new system. And then there are a whole slew of new workflows that have to be navigated every day at every single role within a dental practice, from the front desk staff to the dental assistant to the hygienist to the dentist themselves. They all have different ways that they interact with the software, and different softwares work in a different manner. And so that part, really standing up a quality training organization inside our company, as well as, for lack of a better term, project managers that manage the entire implementation process in concert with our clients, is one of the more challenging things we do. Is where a lot of the hiccups come, quite frankly, is during the implementation process. There's lots of pauses and restarts. It's where people's real desire to get live on the software is tested, and you find out whether or not, they're really understanding what the light at the end of the tunnel and the benefit that they're going to receive is, and whether they can overcome the internal objections and challenges. And it's also a real test in the leadership of the dental organizations, whether it's a solo practice or a multi-location, as to what kind of fortitude do they have to ensure that they can lead this change within their company. And so that piece is big for us. Of course, it doesn't matter at all if we book deals and can't bring them live and can't recognize the revenue. And in this space, the expectation is that you're not paying for the software until you're using it. So it's not like, when I order some new Salesforce licenses or come for renewal, they're like, how many extra do you think you're going to need this year? And it's like, well, maybe not this many until this many months away. They're like, yeah, who cares? Just add them now. start
That's right.
paying for them. Like that doesn't fly in the space.
It
It's
does
just
not.
been how the industry has been trained to interact with software. So we really do have to become excellent at that implementation process.
Yeah, I'm curious. It seems like as when we see our portfolio organizations make that shift, and I would say almost every single organization that we invest in has some sort of aspiration to go up market or is in that process. But it seems as though in my opinion, false belief is that once they make that turn, they can kind of bring on a very lightweight, low value, sometimes high cost, but certainly cost associated, like self-service or product-led kind of onboarding or a self-support type solution. They're just going to kind of dump all these single location, single practitioners into that bucket, and they're never going to have to worry about them again. But you kind of hinted at a number of things along the way there in terms of how vertical markets function, which I really, is in line with what we see in the market, which is high expectation kind of across the spectrum there. So it seems like that's also what you guys have encountered. I'm curious, internally, how much education had to be done on, we've got to provide a great experience across the spectrum here. There are going to be nuances, but it's in no way going to be this, massive arbitrage of profitability that we throw in on the low end of the market.
Yeah, no, I mean, Justin, we've had that conversation maybe a dozen times internally over the past 6 years. Like, can we create an implementation can we create a self-guided way of doing it? Can we sell to into the independent market and then have them walk through with the system itself? It manages the conversion, does the training. It's all LMS driven, automated, product led, the whole thing. We haven't cracked that code. So I don't know if it is, and in our space, nobody has. Now, could there still be some vision of that in the future? Like, absolutely. I think that's like this kind of like North Star that we all pine after, that was like, oh, this would be so amazing if that was the case. But the reality of it is right now, with where our focus has become, it's all decisions on prioritization. And if we decided that we wanted to pursue that path, we would likely need to redirect resources that are creating a lot of success for us in the growth that we have up market. And in the up market area, there's just no chance of not having this hands-on kind of white glove sort of approach to implementation. I do think there is going to be continued involvement with AI that's going to provide some relief for folks on the change management side and in the training side and understanding how to leverage the software. And also, one of the biggest obstacles we have to overcome is we're taking groups of folks that are on disparate systems and we're standardizing them. And when you're on so many different systems, you have no real operational playbook. A lot of these groups don't actually recognize that they're lacking in the operational playbook department until they're forced to come to grips with the fact that now we're going to need to be doing the same thing the same way in all of our offices. And we've never designed SOPs and playbooks that allow us to operate in that way. So it's like this kind of earth-shattering moment for them, which still requires a lot of help from our team to help them understand and design what that looks like. But I think in the future, we'll be able to leverage AI for a lot of that playbook creation as well, because it is somewhat customized on a client-by-client basis.
Yeah, I think the consistency there is, and this is really, in my opinion, the value of vertical SaaS, which is, you're building a very bespoke solution around a very distinct and known set of workflows and problems. And everyone wants to feel like, I'm getting the white glove treatment, to use your words there.
Yeah.
So I think that, from a just kind of general market perspective, I think the opportunity in the short term is probably more feature adoption based. Like, hey, how do I go use that other little thing I didn't know you provided or as a new product, and less of an end-to-end type of situation. But that's kind of the Turing test there, I think, is, can you provide an experience that is, feels like it's human in nature and it's white glove in nature, and you're literally walking someone by the hand throughout that process, and until that's possible, I think there are some arbitrages and things that you can attach additional revenue through and so on. But that to validate your point there, I haven't seen anyone do it well, even within a lot of the horizontal spaces out there where people have been taught to buy SaaS, for the last 20 years in a certain way, that they still want to know there's someone on the other end of the phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a real challenge with perceived value of professional services in this space, and I think in a lot of spaces. And so you have kind of this challenge. Like I've been studying a lot about Epic, because they're kind of the gold standard in healthcare EHR systems, and they have a very involved process for implementation. Yet they also have a huge amount of rebates that they offer and credits that are given based off milestones being hit, where it ends up that the professional services element of their business isn't viewed as like, well, it has to be this full price implementation sort of approach. It's more like, we just need to get these folks live on the software so that we can go ahead and continue to collect the software subscriptions. And we've taken a somewhat similar approach to that. We create different milestones where if people have X amount of locations live within a certain time period, they get discounted professional services, because that's one of the areas where there just isn't this understanding from the client side. They're like, look, we're already going to pay you so much for the software itself. That professional services bucket, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars over a large implementation, is something that they push back on and don't quite see where that value is. Now, to touch on another point that you just made, Justin, like we do build a lot of different products, and we have new releases happening all year that we monetize. We actually went away from the traditional kind of current client account manager sale and CSM model, and we merged those two teams. And so we took the CSMs and the current client sales team, and we just made them an account management team. They're paired with accounts immediately upon closing. And so there's a immediate handoff from the new business sales side to the implementation team, plus their account manager. And then that account manager effectively becomes this point of contact that they have in addition to their implementation coordinator throughout the implementation process. They help to ensure that they're leveraging the technology appropriately. Then they highlight areas of opportunity for further revenue expansion for our company by highlighting where they have new tools or modules or anything else that they can leverage. And so when I joined Planet DDS, that function of selling into our current client base was pretty much non-existent. And our client base was almost non-existent. It wasn't very large at that point in time, 6 years ago, but it was roughly 5% of our annual bookings revenue. This last year was 55%. And so we're really seeing growth and continuing to build and develop products that we can sell into our existing client base. And that account management team not only navigates challenges, concerns, and escalations, but also is a revenue growth engine for us.
Yeah, I was smiling as you mentioned those two items, because if there's like two ubiquitous problems that we see right now across the portfolio, it's activation of revenue. I'd be curious as to everyone's take on this, but it feels like now that we've all kind of undergone this wave of kind of efficiency, where we've stripped away a lot of headcount, we've stripped away, a bunch of shelfware and tools that we didn't need. Like everyone's just busier at this point. And so like we're deploying that one at one of our portcos called Grousy, which is a digital tipping solution for hospitality and parking and valet and so on. But the problem there, kind of, just to put a different lens on this, is, they sell to franchises effectively. Yep. So they, the decision maker with many locations, and they're having a real challenge getting, things from that booking, that contract into deployment into those locations. Cause now you've got to get, 6 people that are at, some parking garage or whatever to like put QR codes out and, put advertising out and so on. And so the solution that a lot of folks we're talking to are thinking about is that kind of rebate, like, hey, implementation would normally cost you X. We're going to waive that as long as you hit, every milestone within that process, right? And I think you
Yep.
have to, have a really good dialed in process as well, where the client's not waiting on you to do something like that. But, kind
Yeah.
of that, stick approach to where it's like, hey, you get the carrot right now, but, we want to make sure that you're moving along that process effectively.
Absolutely.
And then the other big thing aligns to exactly what you said, which is how do we create a better customer experience throughout that entire process so that everyone's not constantly asking, what are your strategic goals for this year? It's like, dude, I just fucking told the sales guy this for like 3 months. And so like blending those teams. And the other thing that we're seeing is them actually getting pulled forward into the end of the sales process quite a bit, to where, they're there, they're stewarding those goals. They understand them and they're ready to go. And it's also kind of an interesting test of commitment on the client part.
Going back a little bit, I think it'd be really difficult to have the same quality and level of onboarding and professional services using AI at this point, especially on the enterprise level. I think that there's some of it that can be offset from it. But to your point, we had, when I was at Sales Off, we had a bunch of vendors where they had these credit systems. And so like you were incentivized internally to meet those things, but then there was someone on the other side pushing you and they were incentivized to do the same thing. And so I think oftentimes when you think about adoption, like that has to be driven from day one, but then ultimately they'd be more successful with it. And so I think it would be hard. I think it would be hard for, at least on the enterprise level, to have it fully run by AI.
Absolutely.
With that said, though, going back to your, once you mentioned earlier, Mike, and the revenue that you're now getting post sale, do you have it set up where your sellers are still selling into that account, or are they going prospecting back into it again? Or the AMs, do they have a quota for those? Where does that revenue number sit?
Yeah, on the AM team. So as soon as the deal is closed, that moves over to the account management team. Now, if there are lingering opportunities that were discussed, like an example of that in our world would be payments. So if we wanted to get the deal closed because they knew that they wanted to move forward with the software, but there was still more conversation that was going to take place as to whether or not they were going to use our payments product, we'll close that deal. And then if the initial new business sales rep had an opportunity for it and had initiated those conversations that had already gone somewhere, there will be a split between them and the AM. So the AM will be expected to pick it up. The splits vary. We have a whole metric about what the different scenarios are for it. But like in this particular case, it would still go 80% to the new salesperson, 20% to the AM, because the heavy lifting had already been done. But now it gets taken off the plate of the new business salesperson. They can continue to move on to other new business sales and rest comfortably that they'll get 80% of that credit, because the account manager now has incentive to continue to work with the customer. It gives them also an opportunity to build a relationship with the customer right off the bat. So that happens occasionally. But we used to have a time period after a deal closed. You had 6 months where you could continue to sell into it, or you had 9 months. We eliminated that completely. And so now we solve it through some splits, but it hands off directly from new business sales to account managers, and account managers all have quotas.
Interesting. So a sales rep in that model wouldn't be, I guess, sandbagging a deal to try to get a bigger one for that first sale. It's more, you're trying to look at them and say more stick and move, make sure, get the first deal done, move it on to the AMs, and then they've got something to bite off and continue on it. It sounds like there is a lot of expansion there, right? So I guess there's kind of a trade-off between getting the first big, giant deal versus just getting a deal across the line.
Absolutely. So the new business sales folks will absolutely try to include as much of the product portfolio as they can in that initial sale, because they know if they don't, then they don't have an opportunity to go back to it later. So it does, from my perspective, create a better experience even for the client at the outset, because they're fully informed about what all of the opportunities are that they have within the software to take advantage, whether it's a patient engagement tool, whether it's an analytics tool, whether it's payments, whether it's an auto eligibility insurance tool. There's a lot of different products that we have that are available that can be selected or can be opted out of. So it really challenges the rep to put together and solution a fully and comprehensive deal, because they can't go back and get it later.
Yeah. And does that changes the skill set then you need to look for in your AM team, right? Because not all CS people or AM folks are comfortable closing and papering deals. So you have to kind of rethink that skill set as well.
Yeah. So it was interesting when we made this change. I mean, we made it about 16, 18 months ago. And we have a few folks that had come over from the CS side, and they had amazing years. In fact, our number 3 booking producer last year was formerly a CSM, moved into the account management role, and just blew it out of the water. And so it is a separate skill set, but what we found is it's created better alignment overall and better clarity for the client. So in the past, you'd have a CSM that's working on all these issues. They kind of turned into firefighters, to be quite honest.
100%.
They ended up like, okay, well, now I need to go to the support person because this ticket didn't get responded to. Now I need to go talk to this person. Oh, they're getting ignored over here. Let me go help them with this. And then I share with them about something that they're not taking advantage of. Like, you're not using our two-way messaging tool or our automated recalls and reminders. You should really use that. The customer's like, yeah, actually, I'd be super interested in it. And then they go, well, let me introduce you to the salesperson over here. And they're going to go ahead and walk you through it. They get to book the deal. They get to make all the commissions. And so you have the CS team that sits there and stares at these other folks that they feel like they're just handing off opportunities to without getting any of the benefit while they run around putting out fires all day long. And so by unifying that function, it not only creates a better incentive for them to maintain strong relationships with the client, but they also now have the benefit of being able to close the deals and reap the rewards of that success. So for us in this space, it's worked out really, really well for us.
Yeah, super interesting.
Mike, I'm curious just because you guys are both here. Like, is this space is the buyer in this space as difficult to sell into as Josh is coming home every day and complaining it is?
So there's multiple buyers in this space, which can make it challenging. We deal predominantly with the CTOs. So they will marshal all the stakeholders. And for our product, it cuts across every function within a dental practice. So you have the RCM team, you have the operations team, you have the clinical team. They are all very, very interested in what this software change is going to be. It can be very challenging to marshal all the proper people and get the buy-in that you need and the consensus across the organization. So Josh is not wrong. It is not like this is not the easiest sale for sure. But I think one of the things that we've done pretty well in our enterprise process is really focus on the multi-threading and ensuring that we don't just have a single point of contact, a single point of failure. And we do it not only from the AM level, but all the way up to the exec level. Like I build a relationship with almost every new prospect that we have that's of any significant size. And I'm not involved in the day-to-day. I'm not quarterbacking the deal, but I'm always there to have those conversations when they need to be had. And then you've got, the AM, and we bring in the products, the team to have the conversation. So we really end up being very multi-threaded, which allows us to, in those moments of darkness that happen in any of the sales processes, there's almost always an ability to have somebody that will speak to us about what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, but that's pretty consistent across most enterprise sales, right? Like, yeah. I do have a serious question there, which is when you're looking at, I won't ruin the question by seeding what I believe is the answer. Like when you're going out and hiring new reps, quite frankly, like folks that are going to be in the field, how much weight do you put on industry experience within the dental space versus maybe enterprise selling skill set and the ability to thread and a consultative sale and all that stuff that normally goes into enterprise? Where's kind of your weighting reside in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question. All of our enterprise reps have dental experience. Not all of them had software experience.
Interesting.
A lot of them were selling in the supply world, where they managed DSO accounts and relationships, but they were selling consumables, equipment, hardware, you name it. There's not a big bench in dental to hire enterprise SaaS salespeople. They almost don't exist. in large part because there wasn't a lot of enterprise upwards of the last 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago when DSOs really became a thing. So every company that started with a desire or intent to sell into DSOs, the enterprise sales folks were like the founders. You look at all the AI companies and the founders were the ones that were driving most of those first deals. And now over the past 4 years, there's now like a professional class of enterprise SaaS dental sales folks, but it didn't exist previously. And so when we've been looking at folks, we've brought people in from outside of dental that have SaaS experience, and they've been successful both in the account management side and on the commercial team. And I would absolutely consider bringing the right enterprise person in from another SaaS and another vertical, but there is a pretty big learning curve. Now, that being said, we do have a solution specialist on the enterprise side that manages a lot of the demos, that's doing kind of this just subject matter expert, gets in the weeds, used to be an office manager. So as long as you have that expertise, if you can have the person with the skill set to navigate the complexity of the deal, even if they haven't come from dental, they could be very successful.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to what I was going to put the spoiler out on, which is like very rarely do you ever find someone who sells to that market a very similar product, proven success.
Unicorn,
and I think
yeah.
that's one of the biggest misnomers that we run into out there,
Yep.
which is, I just need to find someone who's, sold a very similar product to this before. And not
Right.
only are they difficult to find, like I think you're going to probably spend more time or waste more time trying to find that, identical photocopy than looking for root skill sets, which it sounds like in you guys' case is the overall subject matter expertise in terms of how dental offices run and teaching them the other elements of the business.
No, absolutely. If you throw out a JD that's like 5 years enterprise dental SaaS sales experience,
Get 3 people.
you might get one application to that. Like it's just one of those things that doesn't really exist out there. So you do have to make those decisions. It's like, does this person have the knowledge, and do they have enough transferable skills from wherever they came in the dental space that they can learn the SaaS portion of it? Or is this person, so great on the SaaS side that we can get them the specific vertical knowledge that they need to have?
Yeah, I think that going back to what you were saying earlier about the multi-threading skill set, and multi-threading inherently is nuanced, right?
Yeah.
And kind of tying into the type of profile that you're hiring for. I think the nuance in the dental space is that, especially we'll talk it in the DSO upmarket area, is at the very top, you've likely got some sort of financial or private equity backer that is not a dental native.
Yeah.
The executive that they put in, probably not a dental native.
Yep.
Right. Then you get the layer that you talked about, the corporate layer of marketing operations, RCM, that probably has some dental experience across that function, right? So you're still in professional layers here as we're going. And then you go down to the next layer, and these are not business professionals, right? You get the in-house front office, this, that. So, and you need to thread, to your point, through all of those. But the nuance in each one of them is, to me, somewhat unique from other enterprise sales that I've been a part of in the multi-threading, right? Because you're at a professional layer in regular enterprise SaaS at all of those. Even if you go down, you get to a certain point where it's like almost volatile.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. Yeah, no, and the conversations sound completely different, and the motivations are completely different, and so it does create a unique set of challenges in this space.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Mike, this has been an awesome conversation. We really appreciate you joining us. And, I think the key for all of us here is vertical SaaS still is a unique opportunity for anyone out there, as investors, obviously. But, I think even for growth in SaaS, there's still things you can do in vertical if you're a seller or a marketer or whatever that you can't do in horizontal anymore. And it represents unique opportunities. But I still love the concept of narrowing your thinking down to, how can we grow with a really, really great fit for our product today? And, what we need this year may not be what we need in the next 2 years, but we can get really focused, really narrow, and grow really fast as a result of it. So really appreciate your insight on that. It's super important for this audience, most definitely.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. For those of you who are listening, please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the podcast. It helps us expand our reach. We really, really appreciate it. Mike, thank you again for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Great to have you.
Thank you, Mike.
Meet y'all.
Yeah. On behalf of Sean and Justin, this has been another episode of the Cheat Code and Friends.